Hey YouTubers, it's Charlie. So it looks like they've almost found Cable for Deadpool 2, so I'm going to do a breakdown of the actor they're looking at, as well as Domino, because it looks like Mackenzie Davis might end up being Domino. So here we go. So the big news is that Kyle Chandler is being looked at for Cable. They're obviously looking at a number of different actors, but the reason Kyle Chandler's a surprise mostly is just because of his look. He's a really tall person, but he's just not like swole like Cable. And when you're looking at Cable in the comics, typically you think of someone who is a giant that dwarfs Deadpool. Ryan Reynolds is also a very tall person, and even with liberal use of CG, it's hard to show that disparity, so I think that's going to be one of the departures from the comics. Like, we'll see a version of Cable that's very true to the comics, but it's not going to be like the disparity between Colossus and Deadpool, because that's typically the way you think of Cable when you think of him in the comics. You think of him as being Colossus sized, because he's already really big, and largely thanks to the work of Rob Liefeld. Like, you can look here at the Spider-Man picture, you can see how much gear he wears. So like, think about how big Spider-Man is. This is Cable's gear. So the joke is that he's like this walking armory. So I'm expecting them to have some fun with that idea. Just, poking a little bit of fun at Cable's depiction in the comics, while also doing all the normal things that the movie would be doing. They've already said that they're going to be taking liberal opportunities to make fun of superhero sequels in general, which is typically something you see sequel movies do. Like, the best recent example of a movie making fun of sequels is the end of 22 Jump Street. They dedicated their whole post-credit scene to the idea of making fun of like a billion different sequels to their one movie. So Deadpool isn't going to be doing that exact thing, but they will be having a lot of fun poking fun at sequels, particularly like the latest slate of world-ending scenario superhero sequels like X-Men Apocalypse, Avengers Infinity War, Batman v Superman. You get the idea. But let's talk about Kyle Chandler. So if you're not familiar with the actor, most people know him from Friday Night Lights, but he's been in a bunch of movies. He's primarily a dramatic actor. Like, he hasn't done a lot of superhero movies, but most of the characters that he plays, the thing that he's really good at is being the let's get serious character. Like, Friday Night Lights is a good example. You have all these crazy teenagers that are trying to make it through high school alive, win football games, so that's where most of the drama comes from. The coach is the guy who's like, I can't believe all this shit that you guys are getting into. We need to get serious. We have a game. So keeping in mind the tone of the first Deadpool movie, imagine an utterly serious character coming in and trying to kill Deadpool because he does something that leads to some really post-apocalyptic, terrible world-ending scenario. So just to back it up a little bit, if you haven't read a lot of Deadpool or a lot of Cable in the comics, when they first ran into each other, Deadpool had been hired to kill Cable and his team of New Mutants. That's where Cable showed up for the first time. We didn't know that he was secretly the son of Scott Summers and Madeline Pryor, who's kind of like a clone of Jean Grey. So here's where things start to get a little complicated, but Cable is a character that's from the future. He time travels into the past to try and save the future. Now, they've already done that in the X-Men movies, so I'm not expecting like a copy-paste plot element to the movie, but he comes back into the past to train this badass team to take down this future villain called Strife, who turns out, surprise, surprise, is a clone of his in this big plot with Mr. Sinister and Apocalypse. So you can already see, like, there's a lot of crossover with the big X-Men franchise, but they said at least for now, Deadpool is going to be a largely self-contained franchise, just because the tone is so crazy. They're like, we want Deadpool to be able to be Deadpool. We don't want to have to shoehorn him into a big X-Men movie. We just want them to be able to do all the things that they want to do with those movies without having to worry about what's going on in the X-Men franchise. But I would expect, just like with Deadpool 1 having a whole bunch of X-Men jokes, it's not going to be exactly like the Strife arc from the comics, but I'm expecting liberal Easter eggs. So like at the beginning of this big arc back in the 90s, Cable comes back into the past to train a badass team to fight Strife, but Deadpool gets hired by another person in the X-Men universe to kill their team. Then through the rest of the 90s, Deadpool goes off into his own title. They continue to butt heads. Deadpool is just used as this really badass, wisecracking assassin. Most people nowadays, when they think of Cable and Deadpool, they think of like a buddy cop road trip flick, but they didn't really start doing that in the comics till more recently, when they were trying to make the Deadpool character a little more appealing to younger audiences. When he first debuted, he was way more hardcore, there was way more blood. Now he's used mostly for comedy, but what I'm expecting is that the movie will sort of take all that into account. Like, they will honor the first time Deadpool met Cable in the comics. It'll be like Deadpool versus Cable before they have to come together at the end of the movie, and their relationship resembles the more modern comics with Cable and Deadpool. So through it all though, Cable is still the utterly serious character. He's very Kyle Chandler-y. So if you're still thinking Kyle Chandler Cable and it sounds kind of confusing to you, like you're like, I don't really see him as Cable. It's mostly because physically he doesn't look like Cable. Forget about that. That's actually relatively easy to do with a lot of Rob Liefelding of his costume. It's relatively easy to make Kyle Chandler look bigger. It's a lot harder to find a really huge, swole actor that can act really well. That is the problem with Hollywood. Like, it's really hard to find actors that are amazing and are also giants. It's the performance that's hard to nail. So usually when they're looking for actors for specific roles, even in the comic book movies, they usually look for amazing actors first, and then for actors that sort of kind of fit the physical description of the role second. This is actually a good example of that. If you guys don't know Boss Logic, he does a lot of fan art for really big superhero things. This is a good example of what Kyle Chandler might look like as Cable. But it's totally going to be fine. They're shooting the movie early next year, so I would expect them to officially confirm who is playing Cable by the end of this year at least. But let me know in the comments, who do you guys want to see play the Cable character right now? Like, who do you feel like is an amazing actor at being like utterly serious, but also doing action? Because it's a comic book movie, there's going to be a ton of action in it. Cable is like a walking armory, and he has to feel like a threat to Deadpool, like he might actually be able to kill Deadpool. You may have also heard that Mackenzie Davis from *Halt and Catch Fire* is being looked at for Domino. That's like a whole different thing, so I'll talk about that in a future Deadpool video. But I feel like she's a pretty amazing actress, and because she's not as big as, say, like Cable, there's not as much of a stigma attached to the character. Like, there's not as much baggage that comes with casting someone for that role. So I feel like it's going to be a lot easier to find Domino, but I am a big fan of Mackenzie Davis, so hopefully she gets the role. This is more Boss Logic fan art for what she might actually look like if she gets it, which is pretty cool. So in related superhero news, there was a whole bunch of stuff that happened recently. James Gunn talked about DC movies that he was offered, but I think it was post-Christopher Nolan, before Man of Steel. And even bigger than that, Henry Cavill just teased his black Superman costume from the comics that he's going to have in Justice League. So I'll do Superman black costume Justice League next. That'll be my next video. Be sure to subscribe to get that. And then I'll do some new Punisher, because they confirmed Punisher Season 1 is coming in 2017. And probably James Gunn, DC, like the DC films that he said he was willing to direct after that. So there's a whole bunch of comic book, DC, Marvel stuff happening this week. Get hype. So while you guys wait for that to post, you can click here to learn more about the Man of Steel sequel, and you can click here to learn more about the Deadpool sequel. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Let's high five. I'll see you guys tonight.